teacher, and there's a lot of confusion around art materials, and my goal here is for people who inquire about taking lessons with me, that they would be able to quickly understand my particular method of setting you up for success. Start your palette to the paint you choose, why each one is important, why I chose this particular way, and the canvases, how to treat them. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about painting right now. We're just going to talk about art materials so that you understand that, so that when you go to the store, we're going to have some captions and things so that you understand what you're trying to buy. But I've been in the business for over 40 years. I've done watercolors, oils, acrylics. We'll have other videos on watercolors and oils, but right now we're going to concentrate on what kind of materials you need to buy for acrylic painting and to get the best optimal results. And so we'll start with a palette, because this is where a lot of people go wrong. They have a tendency to just work on a paper plate or a piece of plastic or something, you know, because that's what a lot of people do, because it's handy. There's a problem with that. With acrylics, everything is about keeping the paint wet. You want to keep your paint moist and flexible so that you can get lost edge work, juicy paintings that don't look all dry and like you work too hard at it. Talking about palettes. Palettes are very important as opposed to using plates, any of that sort of thing, because your paint needs to stay viscous and wet and creamy while you're painting, so that you can get nice blends, lost edges, rich, sumptuous look. So we use the Masterson Stay Wet palette. It says Masterson embossed on here. I like the red one. You can get these at Jerry's Artorama on Southside Boulevard. I'm not affiliated with them. I just know that they always have them. And the red top one already comes with a sponge in it, and so it's got everything and 3 sheets. But you can also buy replacement sponges and sheets. And these are this is the palette sheet. This is what you'll actually put your paint on. And the sponges, they call them sponges, is because you get them wet, you put them in here, and they keep, these palette sheets have a little bit of absorption, and it keeps the palette paper wet, so that when you put your paint on, it keeps the paint pliable without getting hard edges around it and useless chunks on it. That's what you're trying to avoid. And that's what you'll get working on paper plates and all, and then everything dries out, and then you can't understand why you're not getting the look you want. So palettes are important. I really highly recommend the Masterson Stay Wet palette for that purpose. Once we've got our palette, we want to have canvases that we would work on. Now there's different kinds of surfaces you can work on. You can work on wood, you can work on canvas panels. I don't like working on canvas panels, but they're not bad for little lessons, but you have to frame them in order to hang them. Whereas with these little canvases, you can just kind of put a wire in the back and hang them and paint around the edge, and you can keep them as a, just a keepsake on the wall. I work with different sizes, so a 12 by 16 is ideal for a painting about so. And but if you want to get into serious painting, you want to have something that has a little depth to it. This is what I mean by serious painting is like if you're a little bit more advanced and you feel like your work is to the point where you want to put it in art shows, you don't really want to work on these little dinky things. You want to put them on a substantial surface that looks very professional. You can either paint one color or paint around the edges, and that's called a wraparound technique. So those are what I recommend on a more professional level, but to take my classes as a beginner, you just need these simple cheap canvases that come in packs of 5 sometimes at Michael's or Jerry's or wherever, and they're pretty cheap, and so that would be what you want. I'd say about a 12 by 16 size. I think it's 12 by 16 or 12 by 14. 12 by 16 size is great, or even smaller. So we got a palette to keep the paint wet. We got a nice surface to practice on. We're going to talk about is paint. There's a lot of confusion about what kind of paint to get, and should I, buy Liquitex or Goldens or some, off-brand like Basics. A lot of people bring me Basics, Liquitex Basics. I would recommend do not get Basics because it's got a lot of filler in it, so you're not really paying for pigment, you're paying for filler. So I would rather you don't bring this. Sometimes they're okay, but I'd just rather you get a good material. So what you're gonna buy most of is white. You add white to almost everything when you're color mixing. So get a big tube of white. But to start out with, you can get Goldens or Liquitex, just not the basics one. And then when you're buying your yellow, now Goldens has a primary yellow to add confusion to the matter, but what I really recommend is just a cadmium yellow or a cadmium yellow medium. And this is another brand I like, is Holbein's. I didn't mention that. Holbein's is the best brand. They're harder to find. You can get them on Amazon sometimes, but you have to, special order them. Goldens you can find everywhere, in every store. So then we're on to cadmium yellow medium, and you use a lot of that too. So white and yellow are weak, and the red and the blues are strong. So they tend, just a little bit of this goes a long way, whereas a lot of this doesn't. Now, a lot of people mistake cerulean blue for a blue, but it's not actually, it's a blue, but it's a yellow leaning blue. What you want is your primaries. Cadmium yellow, cobalt, and ultramarine blue are considered primaries. I'll get into the color mixing aspects of those later. Again, this is Holbein, but Goldens is what I'm going to focus on. So ultramarine blue and cobalt blue, that's what you need. Cadmium yellow, white, and now we're going to get into reds. You're going to get into cadmium red medium. Now you'll see other things like quinacridone red. Quinacridone is a pinky red. Cadmium red is more of your straight primary red. That's the one you need to get. You can get quinacridone if you want a pinker red, which mixes nicely to make oranges or purples if you want them bright. Pyrrole red is also pretty primary, but I would recommend cadmium red medium and you'll be fine. Okay, so I don't have burnt sienna here, but it's basically a brown. There's different kinds of browns. This just saves you time if you're trying to make a neutral. Neutrals are made by adding all three primaries together. So if you put these three primaries together, depending on how much red, yellow, or blue is in them, you'll get various kinds of browns. The redder brown has obviously more red in it. The yellower raw sienna has more yellow, and the burnt umber has more blue in it. So if you just start off with those in a tube, it just saves you a little time. So you got raw sienna, burnt umber, and burnt sienna. You can get those in Goldens paints. Viridian is hard to make an aqua. It's hard to make an aqua on your own. So if you can just buy Viridian, you can add white to it or yellow to it or whatever. You can make various greens. White will make a nice aqua for the ocean or something like that. That'll give you this nice aqua color that you can't make with any of these others. So you can make almost every color with these three primaries, but sometimes to get something really special, you need a little extra. So Viridian is one of those. Quinacridone is one of those for making these nice pinks, and without it getting a little bit too orange. And now the other thing, these are two brands here, but they're the same thing. Chromium oxide, and you can buy the little tubes. I have a big tube because I paint a lot, but you can do small tubes. Goldens sells small tubes as well. Chromium of oxide green, and by adding yellow or blue or red or whatever, you can make all kinds of greens. A lot of people buy things like hookers or whatever. You can make them all from this one. So just buy this one, and I'll show you how to make everything. When you're setting yourself up, you're going to need fresh water. I'm assuming you probably won't have plumbing. Well, here we don't have plumbing in the barn, so I pour fresh water out of these little containers. I use these for adding water or cleaning my brush, and sponges for tapping to either get paint off the brush or control the amount of paint on the brush. So sponge, things. I have all this except for the sponges you'll need to buy. These kind are hard to find. They're at Ace Hardware sometimes, but a kitchen sponge will do, just without the scrubby on the back. Now let's cover the confusing subject of brushes. We're going to use filberts. Now, as you can see, there's a whole lot of different kinds of brands and filberts, and the problem with the brush industry is that there's no rhyme or reason to it. You might have a brush that says it's a 10 or a 20, and then another brush that's completely different, and it says it's a 10 or a 20. All you really need, just to keep your sanity, is you need a small one, and some of these can be bought real cheaply. You just need, small ones and some big ones and some medium-sized ones. for your collection. And so I tend not to like to get these brown colored ones. Sometimes that's all you can find. I tend to like the really white ones. These are a little discolored because I've been using them, but they start out nice and bright and white. So I would get those. These are called filberts. They have a round edge to the top. They're a little flat here, but they're really good for when you're starting a painting here. And this is an oil, by the way, but you start an acrylic the same way. And so let's say, for instance, I could draw this. I could start it out with charcoal if I wanted to, or I can draw directly onto the surface with this because it makes a fine line with the tip. But then when I want to do a big stroke like this, it's also available to me. So I can do all these things with this one brush to get this started. This is called a preliminary wash. So that's what we would do first, and pull out the highlights and get the strong shadows in there using just one of the neutrals, which is your brown, burnt siennas, burnt umbers, or raw siennas. We start off like this with the filbert. So that's step one. And a lot of people think brushes are supposed to look like this. They're rounds. I have a bunch of them. I don't actually use a lot of them. Just so you know, mostly I use them to sign my name. So you don't need to get too caught up in buying a whole bunch of these. A few of these are great. You can buy a lot of this kind of stuff I'm about to show you in these packs for this kind of thing. Although most of what they tend to give you is these rounds, which is not very helpful. But every now and then you'll get a fan brush, or you'll get a bright. Brights are these here, these short, fat ones that are kind of shortish, flat on the ends. Now there's some odd ones. These are called flats, and they're not flats. They're short, and I don't know why they even have these, but I have a few of them, but I don't use them very often. And these are called wedge brushes. So again, I don't use these very often. Some people love them, and I used to use them a lot, but really all you need, let's get back to that, is a few different sizes of brights, see, that have these short bristles, and they're for putting the paint on. You know, when you're first putting your paint down, you want something a little bit stiffer. Short hair is stiffer, to get the paint to stick to the canvas and really lay it on. That's what these are for. So that's step two. And then when we're doing our final coat, you always do a final coat. The first coat's never the good coat. You want to use flats. Now you can see there's a lot of different kinds of flats. Flats are long. They're a little bit longer. Here's a bright, and here's a flat. You see the difference. Now the idea is they're flexible, and they don't really pick up much paint. They lay it down, especially when you're kind of gentle with it, and you put it down, and you can just really put the paint on and lay it down and get a nice bright surface color. Just get a variety of sizes. Now, a lot of people love these fan brushes. For acrylics, I would maybe, if you want, just buy one of these packs that usually has one in them, or just buy one of them. There's all different kinds for special effects, but I don't really get into using these very much, except for very rare occasion. I would not waste your money on these. It would be a good idea to have, you know, a couple of, you can buy these real cheap. They usually come in packs of 3 with different sizes, you know, like they're kind of like this, and it doesn't really matter if they're white or if they're red. They do the same thing. But I tend to like these house painter brushes. They're a little more expensive, but they're also a little better, and you can use them for both oils or acrylics, and they're pretty handy. They're good for laying big washes down, or for soft blending techniques when you've got some paint on there and you can blend. So that's what those are for. You just need a couple of those. And okay, now we're going to cover palette knives. These packets come with all these plastic palette knives. Please don't count on those. Those are crappy. What you want is these nice steel ones that they really do a good job of laying the paint down. I would get a couple of sizes. I don't like these really long pointy ones, and there's a lot of different kinds of shapes and sizes. Don't get all those. Just get a couple. All you really need them for is color mixing at this stage. Later on, if you want to do palette knife painting, then we will get into all of that with more fancy brush palette knives, which I have a load of. You can borrow mine until we get masterful at it. And so we've covered pretty much everything in the way of what you need for materials. When you're talking about paper, I tend to work for most of my watercolors when I'm doing a